I can stop. Right? That's what they call liberation, when you understand that that kind of I that keeps telling you, you have to be a little better, you have to be special, you have to be liked, you have to be, it's important they like you more, you have to have a bigger car, you have to be better, you have to be, right? That I doesn't exist. Now we have time to do things that are really important.
To whom?
Pardon?
To whom?
To everyone.
No, you said now I have the
Time to do for others.
Ah, so it's
For others.
why is it better?
Huh?
Why is it better to do for the others?
Well, the thing is, if this I that tells me you need to be better, you need to have more salary, if that doesn't exist, why does it make sense? Why does it make sense?
And who is telling you to do for the others?
My mind?
Suddenly you remember your mind, the whole 2 weeks you're working hard, they're buying him a new car, you forgot him, now you remember him?
No, my mind was there the whole time, but I didn't realize that my mind was telling me there's the separate self. My mind was telling me there's a separate self, and that didn't exist. The mind was there in the first place. Right? My mind is there. My mind wants to be happy and has the right to be happy. All that. So don't go into the other extreme, like thinking there's nothing there. But there's a sense, there's an I that creates, there's a mind that creates a separate kind of I. And only that we try to get rid of. And the mind is still there. Okay, anyway, sorry, I went into that direction. Why did I go into this? We have time later to answer those questions, but why do I get into it? Because I want you to understand the importance of realizing that we're just adding a little bit too much. I'm not saying we don't exist. I'm not saying there's no mind. I'm not saying there's no body. I'm just saying the thing that makes us oftentimes work so hard and waste a lot of time and do crazy things and really exhausting us, that actually doesn't exist. But I'm not saying there's nothing there. Our happiness is important as everyone else's happiness. But the sense of that I gives us a sense that my happiness is a little bit more important, and it's okay to sacrifice someone else's happiness if I'm happy. Okay? Alright. So, having said that, therefore, from a Buddhist point of view, understanding that that particular I just cannot be found. If it was there, we should be able to find it, but it cannot be found. So, therefore, with regard to this particular I, we move from a wrong awareness, a wrong consciousness, yes, there is the separate, permanent, solid I, to doubting it initially. Oh, is it there or not? Maybe it's there, maybe it's not there. And then, through reasoning, through a lot of analysis, we come to the conclusion, well, actually, it cannot be there. We correctly assume it. But that's just an assumption. And then we use the logic that we've previously used to come to that conclusion, to incontrovertibly come to know it. It's not there, cannot find it. If it's there, it should be there. So because the self is dependent on causes and conditions, it's dependent on perception, this such a solid self doesn't actually exist. And then we transform that inferential understanding into a direct experience. We come to see, it can't be found. There's no, I have a direct experience of that. And that is said to be most effective in terms of eliminating our misperceptions, our anger, our craving, our jealousy, etc. So this is why this process is so important, to understand how we can go from a misperception and actually slowly gain an understanding. Now this is what is explained in this particular section. The now category of main minds and mental factors. All right. How, in which sense is that a category? Well, I can't go into all the details because everyone struggles with this idea a little bit in terms of what is a mental factor. But actually it's just a mental function. It's just a function of the mind. So when we say main mind, we're actually saying the main function of every mind. So from the point of view of their functions, we separate. One mind, we separate it from the point of view of different functions. So we can do that with a person too. From the point of view of one person. So the main function of being a person, being human, there's something that is typical human, let's put it that way. So that would be like a main mind. So like this main function of, what is the main function of a mind? To apprehend its object. can do much more than that. It makes contact with its object. The object that appears to the mind makes contact with it. It has a certain feeling, like a sense of pleasure, displeasure, or a neutral feeling when it perceives an object. It discerns the object, as in like, oh, so this is this part, this is that part. So these are all different mental functions. But it has more function than that. It can get very angry with this object. It can have affection towards the object. If it's another living being, have the wish for that living being to be happy. So those are all functions that the mind can have. Certain functions are always there, and certain functions can be developed. Other functions are there because of our misperception of reality, and those are the ones we're going through. All these different functions. So here it's not just a coarse categorization in like perceiving its object directly or indirectly, its object existing or not existing, and so therefore the mind being correct or incorrect, but we're more specifically here dealing with those different functions. And that is a very effective way to get to know your own mind better. Alright, so I'm not going to go into the similarities here. We say that the main mind and the functions, they're connected because of 5 similarities. Never mind, they're written here, you can read through them, but I don't think we have enough time to go through all of them. In case we do, we can always come back to them, but it's only for the completion of this explanation that I added them. I think it's more important to go into the individual mental factors. So there are 51 of them. The first 5 are called the 5 omnipresent mental factors. So this means, as I said earlier on, every mind that basically apprehends its object has 5 basic functions. Alright? So this, again, you need to take your own experience and check whether that's true. So, contact. Contact is basically saying that every mind has the function of making contact with its object. So something appears to the mind. If I ask you, think of your car, you could even tell me what's the color of your car, so you're aware of the appearance of a car. Now, but your mind then makes contact with that appearance. As in, like, it starts to apprehend it, it cognizes it. So what appears, you now do something, your mind does something with it. So that can only be done if you make contact with that appearance. Well, in a sense, already the appearance is making contact with the object. The fact that it appears shows that the object makes contact with it. And then you discern the object. The mind has this ability to discern. This is the car, this is not the car, this is this part, this is this part. So these are all functions the mind always has, can always perform. And there's a feeling. When you see your own car, there may be a feeling of pleasure. If you think of your own car, if you think of a person, right? If you think of food that you really like, when you visualize this food, pleasure arises. Or if there's someone that you don't like, displeasure. And if none of those two, there's no pleasant feeling, there's no unpleasant, it's a neutral feeling. So we would say there's no feeling, but that's described as a neutral feeling. Okay? Pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Volition should be number 4.
Oh, I said intention here. Should be volition, actually.
No, volition after intention instead of after feeling.
No, so this is wrong, actually. Volition should be after, it would be intention / volition. This is wrong. So number 3, feeling / volition. It should not be feeling / volition. It should be 4, intention / volition. I don't know how this got there. And then 5 is attention or mental engagement. So intention or volition is that part of the mind that moves the mind towards certain aspects. That is the basis for intention, for instance, for a motivation. So a motivation is just a coarser type of mind. Like a whole mind can become a motivation. But it's because of those mental function of volition, of like the mind, moving the mind here and there, that we can control it. Well, we'll go through this in a moment. And then there's attention or mental engagement. Right, so now we will explain all of those. I just briefly mentioned them, and once we've gone through them, we do a meditation. So, number one, contact is a mental factor that contacts or meets the object of awareness. Okay? For instance, in order for an eye consciousness apprehending a vase to arise, the eye consciousness must make contact with the vase, by way of the vase appearing, by way of the vase being apprehended. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. It's just a function. A mind always has an object. Why? Because it makes contact with an object. Then there's discrimination or discernment. Different translations for this. Discrimination is a mental factor that discerns its object. It is aware of the object's specific characteristics and thereby able to distinguish it from other objects. We can do that. Very simple. Our mind can automatically do it. Sometimes better, sometimes not as good. But every mind is able actually to distinguish between the different facets. Discrimination identifies the object and serves as a basis for memory. So we identify the object, so therefore later on we can remember these certain characteristics. Like a witness. If you pay attention to certain aspects of the face, for instance, because of the discernment, then later on you may remember those aspects. Discernment concomitant with the conceptual mind. So concomitant just means associated with. So discernment that is part of a conceptual mind, that is a mental function of a conceptual mind, also functions to label and name objects. Also makes sense. Well, how do we label? We take certain characteristics, right? So the table, we discern certain characteristics, and therefore calling this a table, next time we see a similar object, we can call that a table because we discern similar characteristics. Other characteristics may be different, but calling it a table or not depends on certain characteristics, and if those are found in both objects, we call it a table. So the discernment is responsible for that. Then there's feeling. Feeling is the mental factor that experiences the object as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It is impossible to apprehend an object without the presence of any of the three types of feeling: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. In fact, feeling is the element that drives us. We want feeling. It drives us. It is responsible for the majority of our physical, verbal, and mental actions. The reason for this is that pleasant feeling induces attachment, unpleasant feeling induces anger, and neutral feeling induces misapprehension or ignorance. Of those three. Okay? So it's mainly responsible. If there's just a neutral feeling, kind of indifference towards the object, there's just a kind of an ignorance, not necessarily a misperception of reality, but also a kind of like an indifference, in the sense of like, don't want to know, don't care, kind of. But of course, with regard to attachment, obviously, we are never attached. Actually, what we are attached to does not make sense. We are attached to another person. We should actually be attached to the feeling. Right? Well, actually, because the thing is, like, we think the other person, well, we are attached because we think the other person makes us feel good. We're attached to the person, but the problem is, we believe that there's something within the person that is intrinsic in that person that triggers this feeling of happiness. But if that was true, everyone would be attached to that person. But we actually believe that to be true. I remember once my sister, when she first met her husband, she was so attached to him. She was so attached to him, of course it was new, etc. She assumed everyone would fall in love with him. And so when he went off to be with his colleagues, she was always very worried. She's like, she went with his colleagues. And I'm like, so? And she's like, what, but they're all these women. I'm like, yeah? And they're all going to fall in love with him. And I said, why? Because he's so great. I'm like, well, for you, but not everyone's going to... But she felt that, the way she felt about him, being so obsessed, everyone had to feel like that. So her attachment was such that she felt this feeling of pleasure he could give her, he would give everyone. Because he's in and of himself great. Right? This shows how our attachment gives us this impression about things. Of course it triggers a kind of happiness, but we then, this person triggers happiness, we crave the happiness, therefore instead of being attached to the happiness, we're craving the person. Believing that this person has got something in them that creates that grasping, that craving. But really it's mainly us. We're mainly responsible for that feeling of pleasure. Because otherwise other people would have the same feeling of pleasure. If it was really to do with a person, well, everyone should have that pleasure. If that was... Actually, that pleasure comes from us. There's something there it triggers, and so the pleasure is just our interpretation, and it doesn't always stay the same. Right? We see this person one day, oh, pleasure. 2 days, 3 days. We're locked with them in a cave? No way. Right? Eventually it'll change anyway. So that's a very... it's an indication that, yeah, there is this feeling, and we crave the feeling, but we then have another misapprehension in the sense that we then associate that feeling totally with that person and believe this person can give it to us. And so we crave the person. You raised your hand? Hello?
You talk about changing and the mind and the brain.
Mm-hmm.
In the brain, I make a change in my mind, and the brain, the physical brain, don't accept, make problem to accept it.
No, that's impossible. What kind of brain would that be? I mean, you're saying that if you make a change in your mind, your brain is going to revolt. How's that going to happen? When you make a change to your mind, the mind will change the brain.
I said that the brain don't accept it. It make problem to accept it.
What kind of brain would that be? My brain? Like your mind makes a change and my brain revolts? Because your mind, when your mind changes, your brain changes. There's been plenty of research. Meditators, for instance. You know, they did these brain tests on meditators. So they ask a meditator who's always been meditating. First they check their brain, right? So their brain was found to be slightly different from other meditators. And then they took a person who's never meditated, put them in that environment and made them got them to meditate. And they found when this person meditated, the same changes happened automatically. So it was not like, oh, there's a revolting brain. This one has been meditating for an hour, but his brain is just not changing. No, the changes were when the person meditated proper. I'm not talking about daydreaming about dinner, but actually meditating proper, right? They saying, I meditate on this. You could see those changes in the brain right away. It's kind of like saying, for instance, when you're doing some activity, right? Any activity, you're changing every time you do something you've never done before. Okay? Do crossword puzzles. Do a jigsaw puzzle. Learn to drive a car. Every time, your mind changes and it makes changes to your brain. What kind of brain are you describing? You're trying to drive a car? Oh, there's a revolting kind of... This guy never learned to drive a car because his mind learned how to do it, but his brain didn't go along with it. I think that would be impossible.
How I keep the frequency of the change?
Pardon?
How I keep the frequency of the change?
Keep doing it.
Just
Repetition. Repetition. That's the whole thing. Meditation means repetition. You do it one day, right? Focus on the breathing. You can focus on an object for 2 seconds. You do it for 2 seconds. Then the next day, it'll be a little easier. A little easier. So what you're doing is really you're changing your mind and you're changing your brain. So therefore, if you keep doing it, it becomes easier and easier. Anything, like Shantideva says, there's nothing that doesn't become easier through familiarity. This is true for negative things and it's true for positive things. And meditation is just doing it again and again and again. A mental exercise versus a physical exercise. As for the physical exercise, it gets easier. Same thing. So your brain is not going to revolt. I don't think there's a problem. Unless you're doing it incorrectly. But then your mind is revolting, which is why your brain is not going along with it. Okay. Important question. I think it's an important question. That thought may arise, right? But just try it out.
The physical exercise says you need to change every few months the exercise because the muscles have kind of memory and they stop developing the same way. So
Okay.
it's the same.
Okay, so your question is like with regard to physical exercise. I don't know whether you have to change the exercise all the time, but to make it more comprehensive, as in like more effective, you try to use different muscles and and just
work on the same muscle, but it's slightly different.
why? Because if you just work on the same muscle, other parts are being ignored basically. So you need a fuller, more complete exercise.
Not exactly. You just need to. You can work on all the muscles, but you need to change a little bit the exercise because the muscles kind of got used to it and they cease to
Develop further. Ah, okay, very good.
I mean,
Now I
not
get it.
cease, but
Okay, the kind of the development is not it doesn't lead to the same kind of development. Same in meditation. In meditation you do it the same. Like when you do analytical meditation, you take different aspects, right? Like if you think about anger, how this harms me, why I don't want to become angry. Always think about the disadvantages. So you take different aspects to mind every time because you kind of get used to it. Like when you meditate, what you're supposed to do is not just reflect upon, but allow a feeling to arise. You're seeking this kind of like, wow, this is true. Boy, this is really the case. Yeah, I can see that. And then you change. They talk about like a feeling must arise in your continuum, like something like, wow, yeah, that's true, right? And something convinces you. But if you think about it again and again, at some point, yeah, you've already had some conviction, right? Then you go and kind of look at it slightly differently. For instance, being self-centered, okay? Oh yeah, first I think about it, oh yeah, it doesn't make me feel good because I don't sleep that well. Okay, think about it, and then you kind of, okay, you don't sleep that well. But it harms my relationship with my partner. So you then take it from that aspect, think about that and go, yeah, it really harms our relationship. Plus, it doesn't really make me feel happy. Then you look at that. So meditations, you slightly adjust them. And so this is where in Buddhism you talk about your internal guru, right? When we talk about our internal lama. Of course, there's someone else who can teach you and give you some instructions, but in the end you need to get in touch with your own internal wisdom. That's when I say to you, when I guide you through a meditation, you don't need to exactly meditate on what I tell you. You come up with your own ideas and you recognize your own spiritual teacher within you, right? Don't always listen to him when he tells you to sleep now. This is spiritual. That may not be your spiritual teacher. So we have to be very honest here with kind of recognizing. But in the end, your meditation becomes very personalized, just as your physical training. When you become really good at a certain sport, at some point you don't need the teacher as much, the trainer as much, telling you this, that, and the other. You know, oh, these are the muscles I need to work on. Today, this part feels a little stiff, so I need to do this. Your trainer cannot tell you that. You can really tell you. Physical exercise and mental exercise are very similar. So with your mind, you're ever aware of your mind, as you're aware of your body. When you do certain exercise, you become very aware of each part of your body, right? Which is beautiful. This is a very beautiful and important awareness. But since most of our trouble mainly comes from the mind, physical awareness being important, mental awareness is even more important. What am I thinking? What is going on right now? How do I feel right now? What are the thoughts I have? What are my doubts? What are my fears? What are they? What's going on? How do I deal with this? Adjust it. Okay, today I have a lot of fear. What is the origin of the fear? Let's sit with the fear and deal with that. Then today I have a lot of anger. Okay, what is the anger? How is it manifesting? What does it exactly do? You know, it's just like a person with sports. The same thing you do with your body, you do with your mind. And you adjust it. You have to adjust it because every day you're slightly different. Right? One day you're grumpy. The next day you're really happy. So you adjust it according to the situation. Really important. So this is Buddhist practice. And always watch the self-centered mind. What is it doing right now? What is it right now? Like how is it kind of, oh, I'm meditating. Oh, right? And then there's arrogance. Okay, you bring all the balagan, you bring it all into your spiritual practice. The whole thing. Right? Oh, my craving. I left my partner because I'm a nun now. But now I crave my teacher. Right? Oh, I let go of all these clothes. It looks so beautiful. But there's so many maroons, so many different types of maroon. Oh, I got these beautiful clothes now. And I have this huge mirror that no one knows about. And I look at, right? Oh, I got a special way of shaving my head. Or whatever. I mean, it's all there. You just bring it in and you need to be aware of it. Right? Okay. All right. intention, volition. So this is feeling. So feeling, very important, because it gives rise to different afflictions. Then intention or volition. Intention is a mental factor that moves or directs the awareness to the object. When there's feeling towards the object, intention engages the concomitant main mind, so the main mind that is associated, the mind itself. That and the other mental factors with the object. It moves it towards the object, engages it, or it moves it basically to the object. So that is the element of mental karma. That is the aspect of the mind. It moves the mind, and it is responsible for karma, basically. It's that aspect. So the other type of karma is known as intended karma. So this is karma of intention. It is responsible for the intention we have, the mental kind of action, and then that gives rise to intended karma, which are volitional, verbal, and physical actions. So that's the part of the mind that is responsible for directing the mind towards a positive or negative action. And then there's attention, mental engagement. So attention is a mental factor whose main function is to enable the main mind, the concomitant, the associated main mind, and the other mental factors to remain on the object. It prevents the awareness from moving away from the object and serves as the basis for concentration and mindfulness. Attention also focuses on a specific object or a specific aspect of the object, filtering out other objects. Does that make sense? So in every time you have an awareness, you have those five there. The five are present in one way or another, sometimes more active, like sometimes less active. So this is important. This really gives you a good sense of what your mind does. And we'll meditate on those five. We'll have a short meditation after the break. So let's take a break. 20 minutes. We'll meditate on this and then continue with the mental factors. Some of them we'll meditate on, especially on the afflictive emotions. Others, I guess we have to ignore a little bit because we don't have that much time. But we also have time in the afternoon. All right.